Japan's defeat in August 1945 was followed by the stark reality of the 0 hour, a nation utterly shattered. Nearly 66 major cities had been reduced to rubble by relentless conventional firebombing campaigns, and two, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, were annihilated by atomic weapons, introducing a new terror to warfare. Tokyo, once a sprawling and vibrant capital, was officially estimated to be 50 destroyed. Millions of citizens were instantly rendered homeless, industrial capacity was completely paralyzed, and the nation's critical transportation network was virtually non-existent. The immediate and overwhelming challenge for the population was not political reform or economic planning, but simply survival. Finding reliable sources of food, securing minimal shelter against the elements, and coping with the immense psychological trauma of unconditional surrender after centuries of unbroken military history. The physical destruction represented a total and irreversible break from the past, forcing an entirely new beginning. The American-led Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SCAP, under the command of the imposing General Douglas MacArthur, began the military occupation immediately. Unlike the divided occupation of Germany, the post-war governance of Japan was centralized entirely under MacArthur, granting him near absolute authority to restructure the nation. Initially, many Japanese people deeply feared harsh retribution and colonial rule, but SCAP quickly prioritized two seemingly contradictory objectives: demilitarization and democratization. The primary military goal was achieved instantly, with the disbanding of all armed forces. The psychological and social task of democratization was far harder. The Japanese population accepted the occupation with a startling degree of discipline and compliance, seeing it as the inevitable consequence of defeat, and for many, the only reliable source of order, food, and stability. One of the most profound and far-reaching psychological shifts in Japanese history occurred on January 1, 1946, when Emperor Hirohito issued the significant Humanity Declaration. This declaration formally and explicitly denied the long-held tradition of the emperor's divine status, Arahitogami, and explicitly asserted that the emperor was a mortal human being, just like the ordinary people. This pivotal announcement shattered the ideological foundation of the militaristic state Shinto religion and the ideology built upon imperial divinity. While shocking to traditionalists, this carefully orchestrated act allowed the emperor to remain the crucial symbolic head of the state, ensuring national continuity and acting as a necessary and effective bridge between the defeated old nation and the radical new democratic reforms imposed by SCAP. In the immediate, desperate years spanning 1945 through 1947, urban reconstruction efforts were purely focused on enabling basic survival. There was no funding or capacity for grand, comprehensive city planning. Instead, scarce materials were hastily organized to create minimal emergency housing and restore basic infrastructure like clean water and minimal rail transport for food distribution. Millions of people lived in makeshift shantytowns, yamichi, that sprung up amidst the vast ruins, relying heavily on the black market for essential food and supplies. This period was fundamentally characterized by incredible resourcefulness and shared hardship, where community bonds and mutual aid often proved far stronger and more effective than non-existent governmental structures, as families shared labor, tools, and scarce resources to construct basic dwellings. One of SCAP's most successful, equitable, and genuinely transformative actions was the land reform program, meticulously implemented between 1947 and 1949. Before the war, a small, highly privileged minority of landowners controlled the majority of the nation's vital farmland, leading to severe rural poverty and tenant exploitation. SCAP legally forced the sale of these lands to the actual tenant farmers at low, controlled prices. This powerful move created a vast and stable new class of owner-farmers, virtually eliminating rural tenancy and reducing national wealth inequality significantly. The land reform immediately stabilized the essential rural economy, dramatically boosted domestic food production, and provided a broad base of economic stability that would be vital for the nation's future industrial growth. In 1947, Japan formally adopted a new, fundamentally democratic and radically pacifist constitution, drafted largely by SCAP officials. The most famous and controversial article is Article 9, which forever renounced war as a sovereign right of the nation and prohibited the maintenance of any land, sea, or air military force, though this was later reinterpreted. The Constitution also established a genuine, functional parliamentary democracy with mandatory universal suffrage, crucially including women, guaranteed a strong Bill of Rights, and firmly placed the emperor in a purely symbolic figurehead role. This new legal foundation forced Japan to focus all its creative energy, limited resources, and national will entirely away from military expenditure and completely toward peaceful economic and social development. SCAP simultaneously targeted the powerful zaibatsu, the massive family-controlled industrial and financial conglomerates, such as Mitsui, Mitsubishi, and Sumitomo, that had historically fueled Japan's military expansion and war machine. SCAP sought to ruthlessly break them up entirely to promote true economic competition and democracy. While the complete formal dissolution failed, due to the zaibatsu's sheer complexity and the pressing needs of rapid economic recovery, the attempt successfully led to the creation of decentralized, professionally managed companies organized into enterprise groups, keiretsu. This action, combined with new anti-monopoly laws, spurred competitive innovation across the business sector, which would prove absolutely essential for powering the nation's later economic miracle. The initial phase of the occupation saw a dramatic, visible, and sometimes overwhelming influx of American culture. Jazz music, glossy Hollywood films, organized baseball, and even simple products like chewing gum became widespread novelties, eagerly consumed by a populace starved for novelty after years of strict military censorship and deprivation. This rapid cultural Americanization was largely a superficial layer over deeper societal changes, but it immediately provided a much-needed sense of modernity, novelty, and optimism for the future. It also provided a vital outlet for a young generation eager to reject the rigid nationalism, austerity, and militaristic traditions that had disastrously led to defeat and suffering. By 1947-1948, the strategic priorities of the United States began to shift dramatically due to the escalating global tensions of the Cold War. Concerns about the spread of communism in East Asia, particularly the collapse of the nationalists in China and the crisis in Korea, prompted what became known as the reverse course. SCAP abruptly stopped emphasizing punitive deconcentration and started focusing intensely on rebuilding Japan as a stable, anti-communist economic bulwark in Asia. This shift meant reluctantly abandoning some early socialist reforms, actively re-empowering former business leaders, and aggressively promoting rapid industrial growth, ensuring Japan's economy could quickly become a powerful, stable capitalist ally against the emerging communist threat. In 1949, the U.S. dispatched banker Joseph Dodge to implement a drastic and painful economic stabilization plan known as the Dodge Line. This severe plan mandated immediate fiscal austerity, ending all government deficit spending, rigorously balancing the national budget, and fixing the exchange rate at $1, 360 Japanese yen. While initially causing a sharp economic recession and significant unemployment, the Dodge Line was ruthlessly effective. It successfully halted debilitating hyperinflation and created a firm, stable financial environment. This newfound monetary stability was absolutely essential for restoring foreign trade and attracting international investment, setting the necessary reliable conditions for future export-led growth. The outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950 provided the first major external catalyst that violently accelerated Japan's fledgling economic miracle. Japan instantly became the primary logistics, supply, and repair base for the UN and US forces fighting just across the strait in Korea. The sudden, massive, and unexpected demand for Japanese-made goods, services, and repairs, a funding stream known as special procurement, poured billions of desperately needed dollars into the fledgling Japanese economy. This massive demand immediately revived dormant heavy industries, created instant employment, and allowed factories to rapidly modernize their equipment with fresh capital, effectively turning a global crisis into a major economic opportunity for Japan. With basic economic stability achieved, Japanese city planners shifted their focus from emergency reconstruction to comprehensive, long-term modernization. They adopted a practical, entirely forward-looking vision focused on rapid industrial recovery and efficient public transport, often prioritizing economic function and utility over historic preservation. Major initiatives included massively widening key arterial roads and rebuilding efficient rail systems, sometimes from scratch. The devastation of the war, paradoxically, provided the opportunity for radical modernization, allowing cities to incorporate new zoning and utility systems that would efficiently accommodate rapid, future industrial and demographic expansion. Japanese industry quickly realized that to achieve sustained success internationally and compete with Western nations, they needed to entirely shed the pre-war reputation for cheap, low-quality, poorly made goods. They enthusiastically adopted rigorous management and quality control techniques championed by American experts, most notably W. Edwards Deming and Joseph Juran, who were largely ignored in the US at the time. The focus shifted entirely to total quality management, TQM. This obsession with absolute quality and efficient, waste-reducing production methods became the defining hallmark of Japanese manufacturing, profoundly transforming their global reputation and making them fiercely competitive in products ranging from textiles to advanced electronics. Japan's greatest and most enduring asset throughout this period was its highly disciplined and historically educated populace. The post-war reforms emphasized mass education, expanding compulsory schooling from 6 to 9 years, and establishing a strictly meritocratic system. Crucially, unlike pre-war education, the focus shifted sharply away from rote learning and nationalistic dogma towards technical skills, science, and critical thinking. This focus created a massive, capable pool of technically proficient workers and engineers who quickly adapted and perfected modern production methods and ultimately became the human engine for the nation's profound economic miracle. The new constitution granted Japanese women full legal equality, including the fundamental right to vote, the right to inherit property, and the right to demand equal pay. While deep-seated traditional societal roles were slow to fully change, the severe post-war economic environment demanded that women enter the workforce in far greater numbers to facilitate family rebuilding and support. This economic shift gave women significantly greater economic agency and social visibility outside the home, fundamentally altering the traditional Japanese family structure and setting the crucial groundwork for greater long-term gender equality in subsequent decades. The 1950s saw a massive, sustained government investment in crucial physical infrastructure. Recognizing that fast, efficient transportation was key to sustaining export-led growth, the government prioritized massive projects like the Tokaido Shinkansen, Japan's revolutionary bullet train, and the construction of modern highways. These projects, often initially funded by high internal savings rates and later by World Bank loans, created millions of construction jobs, heavily spurred vital material industries, steel and concrete, and drastically reduced shipping times, making Japanese goods exponentially more competitive on the international market. Initial post-war reconstruction relied heavily on traditional sectors, such as coal mining and textiles, But the future of the economy belonged to new high-tech industries. Companies like Sony, founded in 1946, pioneered transistor technology and consumer electronics, focusing on miniaturization. This strategic shift toward high-value, small-sized export goods allowed Japan to successfully overcome its inherent limitations on natural resources and reduce its reliance on heavy bulk manufacturing. This focus on miniaturization, quality, and high technology quickly became a major source of national pride and rapidly growing economic wealth in the 1960s. Beyond the urgent material reconstruction, there was a profound and necessary societal effort to redefine the very core of Japanese identity. The military defeat had completely discredited militarism and ultranationalism, and the occupation had installed foreign models of democracy. The public engaged in intense soul-searching and philosophical debate, Kyoto-tai debate, about what it truly meant to be Japanese, without the psychological crutch of the emperor's divinity or imperial ambition. This eventually resulted in a healthy return to appreciating traditional arts, aesthetics, and cultural continuity, but redefined entirely outside the crippling context of hyper-nationalism and militarism. The rapid, relentless, and all-consuming focus on intense economic growth came at a significant and often painful social cost. The new, competitive, and meritocratic corporate culture demanded extreme working hours, unquestioning loyalty, and led to the phenomenon of karoshi, death by overwork. Urban areas became severely overcrowded, leading to critical pollution and housing crises, despite massive new planning efforts. This intense period of growth created a new kind of social stress, essentially trading military repression for corporate conformity and economic anxiety, even as the nation grew exponentially wealthier. Japan formally regained its national sovereignty with the signing of the Treaty of San Francisco in September 1951, which officially took effect in April 1952. The end of the 7-year occupation was a moment of deep, collective national pride, marking the transition from a defeated, dependent nation to a sovereign, fully independent state. However, the accompanying U.S.-Japan Security Treaty ensured a continued, strategically located American military presence, a crucial political compromise that secured Japan's external defense and allowed it to maintain its pacifist Article 9, thus maximizing domestic investment in the economy. By the mid-1950s, the economic miracle was undeniable and well underway. The phrase Izanagi boom was used to describe the sustained, unprecedented period of double-digit GDP growth that followed the Korean War. The comprehensive focus on exports, low initial wages, exceptionally high corporate investment, and highly efficient production created a powerful, virtuous cycle. Japan rapidly transitioned from a dependent recipient of foreign aid to a major global economic power, stunning the same Western nations that had defeated it only a decade prior, demonstrating the profound resilience and economic discipline of the Japanese people. The spiritual rebuilding of Japan involved the necessary act of redefining its core religious and moral framework. State Shinto was formally abolished and stripped of government support, but core Shinto practices survived and thrived as deeply rooted cultural rituals. These fundamental practices, centered on ancestral respect, community harmony, and aesthetic purity, provided a vital sense of continuity and stability amidst the radical social and material changes. Many citizens returned to these traditional practices, not for imperial loyalty, but for comfort and a strong connection to an unbroken cultural past that transcended the recent military defeat. The 1964 Tokyo Summer Olympics served as Japan's ultimate global declaration of total post-war recovery and modernization. It was a moment of intense, collective national pride and global validation. The immense infrastructure built for the Games, including the first Shinkansen, bullet train, and modern stadia, showcased a nation that had successfully transformed itself from utter ruin to global modernity in under 2 decades. It symbolically closed the psychological loop of the war, marking the firm shift from defeated nation to successful, peaceful, global partner. By the 1960s, a new generation had emerged that had no direct personal memory of the war or the devastating poverty of the immediate post-war years. This critical generational shift cemented Japan's commitment to pacifism and prosperity as core values. While the older generation bore the psychological scars and guilt of the war, the younger generation was defined by optimism, rising consumption, and a relentless desire to maintain global economic leadership, ensuring that the focus remained firmly on stability, innovation, and growth, rather than returning to the militaristic past. Japan's post-war reconstruction remains one of the most remarkable and inspiring stories of sustained national resilience and recovery in modern history. Its success was a complex product of 3 powerful converging forces: SCAP's decisive, transformative reforms, especially land reform and the Constitution, the unforeseen external catalyst that provided the initial capital, the Korean War, and most profoundly, the Japanese people's commitment to high education, intense discipline, and unwavering communal effort. The society that successfully rose from the ashes of destruction was fundamentally democratic, resolutely pacifist, and astonishingly powerful economically, demonstrating that strategic defeat could ultimately lead to an unforeseen and profound national renewal.